Hello, and welcome to Aggressive Monitoring, an effective approach that supports data driven instruction, decisions, and interventions. Our learning targets for today are the following: educators will be able to identify and understand the what, why, and how of aggressive monitoring. Learning will be demonstrated through reflection and checks for understanding. Now, we will take some DNA. Our Do Now activator is a question and advice engine. Help. Your coworker Lester needs advice. For the past month, he has only been able to provide one-on-one support to the same at-risk 5 to 7 scholars. When 70% of his class truly needs help to grow slash master skills on a daily basis. His data looks bad. Classroom management is becoming unbearable, and he is stressed about an upcoming classroom observation. Gift Lester with one question you would ask him and one strategy you would have on deck to support him in his growth process. How would you coach Lester? You have 3 minutes to think about your answer. Write them down. What one valuable question would you ask Lester? And then what valuable piece of advice or strategy would you be prepared to offer him? Stop the video or pause the video if you need more time. Possible questions that you may have generated and or shared would be the following. We would possibly ask Lester, what have you learned about the 5 to 7 scholars? What about the other scholars? Are there any patterns or challenges? Through this questioning process, Lester would absolutely reveal that he's learning a lot about the 5 to 7 scholars. He possibly knows their learning gaps, their background, what are some things some foundational skills they really need. But he may tell you that he doesn't really know a lot about the other scholars besides that they're just not getting it. Why? Because he's not having time. He's not having that intervention time. So all he knows is what they can produce, which is right or wrong or accuracy of responses, etc. With him only having that data, he's not able to really probe and ask questions to go deeper into where their language, where they're learning, and or maybe their language stopped. Maybe there's a vocabulary issue. Maybe they're not even understanding what they're being asked to do. Maybe there's a mental block, a social emotional block that maybe they just don't like math or they don't like this particular subject area. So then what advice will we have on deck for Lester in this process? Well, some possible responses that you possibly generated and shared are to utilize a different intervention rotation process. Why is Lester still going to the same 5 to 7 scholars that are eating up all of his intervention time? Perhaps he should start visiting the fast completers, the early completers, reconsidering the order in which he's going. Those scholars are at this point used to having Lester's time and his attention. So maybe it would build their stamina to have a little bit more time to themselves and for him to start with the fast completers to get himself to that 75% of scholars during this time where he's monitoring progress. He could also use stations. He could have scholars empower them to be able to check their own answers, have They can complete their responses and then they can check their answers. They can pair share and have another scholar to check their answers. This could be a peer-to-peer support process in the stations. And in that way, they're getting the feedback. They're just not having to wait for him to be the only person to give him that feedback. Perhaps he could bring the intervention supports to the scholar's desk instead of him walking, instead of him trying to get all of this accomplished in small groups and maybe only reaching 5 to 6 scholars in one small group at a time, and that's eating up the entire intervention time. Perhaps he can go to the scholars. He can stand up and go to their desk and kind of do a runway walk around the room to see who knows what. There's so many ideas to share that Lester can use and to support him. And hopefully you were able to generate some things. We do want to make sure that we redirect any blaming of progress or performance on scholars, right? We know it is not scholars. It is not an issue of scholars not wanting to learn, and it is never an issue that they're not learning because of we want to make sure that we have a mentality as educators that scholars can learn and they will want to learn with the right supports and with the right relationships with the adults in their lives. So let's get into it. What is aggressive monitoring? Agree or disagree and explain. One of the major responsibilities of a teacher during independent work is to actively gather real time, objective, aligned data that will enable direct action when student misconceptions are identified. At this time, I want you to stop and vote with your feet. Stand up and go to the left side of the room right now if you agree with the statement. Stand up and walk over to the right side of the room if you disagree, and be prepared to explain your rationale. Ready, set, stand up, and go. Now that you're standing, either on the left side of the room or the right side of the room, look around. How many of us agree? How many of us disagree? And at this time, we're going to have you share. One person from the agree side, I want you to share. Why do you agree with the statement? And then one person from the disagree side. Why do you disagree with the statement? Is it because of the entire statement or one aspect of the statement? Go ahead and make your thinking visible. Hopefully we're able to clarify any misconceptions, but our training topic today is about aggressive monitoring. And this is the exact definition of what aggressive monitoring sets out to accomplish. One of the major responsibilities of the teacher during independent work is to aggressively monitor. And what this looks, feels, and sounds like is to actively gather real time, objective aligned data that will actually enable direct action. It tells us what we need to do as the educator when scholars have misconceptions and that we realize, wow, this is what we need to do to grow their practice right now in real time. And so hopefully we'll have those of you who moved to the disagree side of the room, hopefully you moved over to the agree side because this is the overall goal of aggressive monitoring. So now we have a dilemma. We have a colleague in our building that says, so what? I like to sit, teach, and monitor scholars from my desk. Don't judge me. We want to coach Lisa up fast. Based on the previous goal of aggressive monitoring, what question would you ask this colleague to help her grow and move towards changing her practice? We could easily tell her what to do, but it's more powerful for her to understand the benefit of why she should adjust her practice. What question can you generate to support helping her move and shift and transform her mindset? And then what strategies would you be able to help to support her to do this, to be able to make the change? Go ahead and write down and journal your response. Pause the video if you need more time. A possible question we might ask is, how will you be able to actively gather real-time, objective aligned data that will enable direct action if and when scholars' misconceptions are identified? Meaning, Lisa, how are you going to monitor scholars from your desk? Middle schoolers, is that an easy thing with middle schoolers? Is that easy with scholars in kindergarten or primary grades? Is it easy to support scholars in intermediate grades or even high schoolers? This is a really powerful question. So, are you able to effectively monitor? And if you can monitor scholars from your desk, how are you providing them with accurate feedback that's going to grow their practice? And then how are you circling back to ensure that they actually get it? It's not a one time, I see what you're doing, give you some advice and move on. You often have to circle back around to see future forward how they're doing that, how they're doing now after you've given them the advice and the suggestions and the guidance that you've given them. This is a huge process that is almost impossible to do from Lisa's desk. So while this is not judging her, this is absolutely working to coaching her up and to helping her shift her mindset. Aggressive monitoring is not merely circulating in the classroom. It is focused and intentional monitoring that is highly effective in catching student misunderstandings. The goal of aggressive monitoring is to ensure student mastery prior to the actual assessment and prior to the assessment week, right? So we want to make sure that feedback is daily. So go ahead and stand up if you agree with this or sit down if you disagree. Ready, set, act now. Hopefully you're standing because aggressive monitoring, just like we taught and told our colleague Lisa, it will require us to have an intentional process for monitoring, right? And have effective strategies for being able to catch these misunderstandings. And what strategies will we use if our scholars are just not getting it? It is a very layered process and approach of which we're going to break down even further. What is this effective school doing to make a difference each day? What do you notice? And what do you wonder? Let's go ahead and see it and name it. And afterwards, be prepared to do a turn and talk and make your thinking visible. Take notes as you watch.
We've moved from a much slower data cycle. It was 6 weeks when we first started, and now we're actually within the class period. So the goal now is that we know what our students are going to do on their interim assessments before they get to them. And the way we started to do that is every day the students have a do now and exit ticket, which is very data driven. The teachers actually adjust the lesson based on what the students do on their do now as soon as they get into class. Then when students are working independently, teachers are using a strategy called aggressive monitoring. So they're scanning the room, so looking at every student's work and figuring out a micro adjustment that they either need to pull a small group in the moment or adjust the instruction for the whole class in the moment. So we've gone from thinking about a 6-week cycle to thinking about the exit ticket is too late. We need to adjust instruction during the class in the moment so that the kids then can master the exit ticket rather than it being a much longer time between us noticing the data and adjusting for that data.
We actually see our teachers actually monitoring, and it's not just walking around. They're actually looking for something in particular. Because a lot of teachers do monitor, so they walk around, just to make sure kids are on task. But now they're walking around with a purpose. So now they know exactly what it is they're looking for, so they can address that misconception in the moment.
So generally, there are students who miss the review question and they need an adjustment. Sometimes it's half the class, in which case we need to stop. We're not ready. Less frequently, although it does happen, especially in our higher level classes, we adjust the class because of the diagnostic question. So there's two questions. There's the review question and the diagnostic, which is, do you already know our lesson for today? And if the kids do already know the lesson for today, then they have an alternate assignment. Sometimes they're doing something completely different. Sometimes they're going straight to the independent work and they don't need the teacher mini lesson. And so those students can go ahead and do that.
Good job. So again, we're doing our first two boxes. I think the reason this is a great strategy is because, again, we're addressing the problems right then in the moment. We're not waiting until the exit ticket. We're addressing it right then so that all scholars are successful when it's time for them to take the exit ticket. And due to the fact that we're on the 8AB that's scheduled for science, my teachers don't see the kids every day. So that means if I know that you having a misconception on Monday, I won't be able to see you until Wednesday. So I want to address that before you leave my classroom, because I know I won't see you the next day. I will only see you on Wednesday. So it allows us to address the issue in the moment and use that data to help support our scholars.
Now, what is this effective school doing to make a difference each day? What did you notice? What do you wonder? Go ahead and summarize just some of the things that you gathered from this video that you saw and that you're able to name via a hashtag summary. So one of the things I can definitely identify is they provide that hashtag immediate feedback. So the educator mentioned that they're on a block schedule, so they have A days and B days. He doesn't have 2 days to wait to support the scholars, because it's specifically scholars from our background and demographic. Sometimes the recall and memory recall is a challenge. And so he wants to support and fix that skill right then. He doesn't want to wait 48 hours before he sees them again to do that. So hashtag immediate feedback would be a summary of aggressive monitoring and an effective practice that this school is using. Go ahead and pause the video, and in your note-taking guide, write down what are some hashtags to summarize some of the best strategies and effective practices that you notice that's making a difference at the school. Pause the video if you need more time. Thank you for journaling and sharing your ideas. Please add these hashtags to your notes that unpack the value of aggressive monitoring in a more deeper, more meaningful way. To debrief this is also a hashtag, this is a strategy. The hashtag summary is also a strategy that's great for older scholars who love to write a little less and would probably share more if you allow them to hashtag it. So we see hashtag exit tickets for mastery, hashtag independent work structures, hashtag daily, hashtag skills mastery, standard focus, hashtag do now activator, hashtag not just circulating, hashtag diagnostic question to see what scholars already know so you can give them an alternative assignment instead of making them go through the whole lesson with everyone else. This way, you're not having a false sense of teaching, right? Oh, well, I have over 70 of my scholars learned it. Well, maybe 50% of your scholars came into this lesson already having learned these skills. So you really needed to maximize their time better, because they could have stretched their thinking and their learning while you could have worked on that with a smaller group of scholars and given those learners who've already mastered it an alternative assignment. Hashtag immediate, hashtag everyday feedback, hashtag monitoring with purpose. Very good. And so these are just some hashtags. Also, remember to use this strategy in your classrooms, specifically for older scholars as well. They really like the hashtag summary. Now, we're going to watch another short video. It's a 1-minute video. We want to utilize the same hashtag summary approach after watching this video to see what the teacher is doing during the aggressive monitoring process. What may we see, name, and learn from her practice? So let's see it and name it via hashtag.
So I think that you need to know your kids and you need to know them well and you need to know what they know and they don't know for our week to week checkpoints. Like, it's really important for us to use that data to be like, okay, did I do a good job teaching this? Like, or do I need to go back and reteach? Or even like your daily data. We do aggressive monitoring, which is what I was doing in the group. Like, okay, so I know that 4 kids didn't cite their evidence today. So before I send them off to do this by themselves wrong, I need to make sure I address that misconception in the moment because tomorrow's too late. So how are you making sure that the data that you're using is going to be best for impacting the kids? It is a lot of data, but I think if you prioritize for what purpose you're using each piece of data, it's going to be a lot more manageable.
Wonderful. Go ahead and take the time to personally journal in your note-taking guide or your journal and write down your thoughts via hashtag. So you can create 2 hashtags or continue to go as long as you want. Pause the video, even have a discussion if you have a teammate with you. Go ahead and do a turn and talk where you guys can share this. But first, respect the time. Respect the solo time and give each other time to personally think and make sure before you turn and talk, both of you have content to bring to the table. Make your thinking visible. Pause the video if you need more time. Some sample responses from this video that we just watched may include, but is not limited to, hashtag tomorrow is too late, hashtag data today equals change today, hashtag know your students, hashtag reteach, hashtag teacher reflection about classroom practice, hashtag best impact, hashtag prioritize, hashtag use a clipboard, hashtag walk around and monitor with intention, hashtag stand up, no desk teaching, hashtag ask questions. Hopefully these can add to your collection of hashtag summaries of this video. Aggressive monitoring means giving fast feedback and collecting data on how your students are doing, not just circulating to monitor scholar compliance. Add these additional notes to your journal. Aggressive equals moving quickly and marking up scholars' work to give them that feedback. Hitting at least 75% of your scholars, so working your way around the room. That starts with the fastest writers. So just like we talked about Lester as having a strategy earlier on, and he's only working with 5 to 7 scholars every day. No, start with the scholars who complete their work early, or they tend to be the fastest writers or have the fastest ability to really make their thinking visible. We want to identify at least 2 targeted problems, if it's a math class or a science class or some kind of language art skill or component. Really hone in if there's multiple problems that they're working on during this 20-minute segments. You want to make sure that you're honing in on which ones you will actually want to look at. You don't have to skim and scan the entire, just focus on 1 or 2 items that you want to look at and provide quality feedback on. And now for your sample materials, you want to make sure that you use check marks for the correct evidence or key writing parts that you're looking for. Maybe you can place a star if something's incorrect if needed, or also prompt scholars on how to fix their responses. So we have to be ready to really help them correct their errors. And sometimes this doesn't mean telling them the right answer, right? It means guiding their thinking so that they can get to that right answer on their own. Now, when do I facilitate aggressive monitoring? Well, go ahead and write that down. But when you think about the gradual release of responsibility, we want to make sure the I do, we own that. The we do it together, that's guided instruction, where we infuse the scholars to practice with us. Then there's the you do it together piece, and then the you do it alone. But either way, aggressive monitoring occurs. It is intentional time when we assess the learning and learning intention against the success criteria. What does success look, feel, and sound like, right, for our scholars according to the standard that we're teaching? Scholars apply their learning through task completion and receive feedback. The teacher and scholar gets to reflect on their skills and strategies for meeting their unique individual goals, i.e. teaching effectively. And so the teacher is looking at their instruction. Was I successful in my instructional practice? And the scholars get to personally reflect on their skill building. Are they confident that they actually have that skill? Now, how long does aggressive monitoring take? Well, 20 minutes. 20 minutes is an ideal amount of time to give scholars so that they may work, and the teacher may come around and have that aggressive monitoring time. So 20 minutes is all you need in a daily lesson to release the scholars to work on their own. They're building those skills. They're able to apply it, have that strategic thinking, recall, all of those things on their own while you come around and assess where they are in their skill. Now, why is aggressive monitoring beneficial? Well, we've kind of already unpacked this. Aggressive monitoring equals real-time adjustments. Why wait? We don't have 6 weeks to wait. We don't have a week to wait. We don't even have 48 hours to wait. And so pretty much aggressive monitoring equals real-time adjustments, which allows us to give fast feedback daily, collect data on scholar progress, and to provide real-time data-driven decisions, interventions, and all types of things. But it's that real-time piece based on the data that we're able to collect. Now, how do we facilitate aggressive monitoring? You can go ahead and brainstorm this in your journal. How? How do we get this done? How do we accomplish this goal? Take some time in your journal to respond to this question. Pause the video if you need more time. Now we'll spend some time learning about how we actually utilize this classroom approach. So during independent time or independent practice in our lesson, the I do, you do, the I do, we do, you do together, and you do alone. When we get to that you do alone process, what we want to make sure is that we're monitoring aggressively, right? Or we have the aggressive monitoring piece. That means that we check students' independent work to determine whether they're learning what we actually taught. We want to create and implement a monitoring pathway, meaning how are you going to move around the room? How are you going to monitor? Is that going from table group to table group? Are you going to start with the early completers? Is there some kind of signal on their desk? Do they have a green, a yellow, and a red color code on their desk? And maybe once it says green, that tells you that the scholars are done. And maybe you go to those scholars first. So you hit the early completers. But what system would you use to monitor and to walk around your classroom? Will having classroom rows prevent you from doing that? So a floor plan is important. So create a seating chart to monitor students more effectively. You want to make sure on your list of scholars that you have the names of your scholars, so you're not spending time writing their name down as you're walking around. And monitor the fast writers first. than the students who need more support, because those scholars, they're going to slow down the process. So you want to start with your fast early completers. Now stop, think, and jot. Take the next 30 seconds and jot down what systems would you use to support you in this process and making sure this happens. Who will you go to first? Is your classroom? These are some reflection questions. What does success look like on the assignment? Are you looking for accuracy, details, complexity of thinking? What is your best runway pattern? Is it going to be left to right, zigzagging across the room? And what classroom floor plan design will best support this aggressive monitoring process? Is your room set up in rows, tables, or groups? Use your note-taking guide to respond to the following statements. Pause the video if you need more time. Now turn and talk if your colleague is with you to share your thoughts. Now, some other things that we need to remember when it comes to monitoring the quality of students' work. So, first is how we're going to aggressively monitor. Now, we want to focus on how do we monitor the quality of scholar work? Well, these are some steps. We want to check answers against the exemplar. Do we ourselves even know what an exemplar response looks, feels, and sounds like? Sometimes we can use our PLCs and we can divide up the work and have one of our colleagues themselves to complete the work. And from year to year, we can take pictures of scholar exemplar work to ensure that we have a standard for success that we're measuring against the quality of work scholars are producing. This allows us to walk around with this exemplar on hand to be able to show scholars in the event that we need it and to remind us of what an exemplar work looks like. We want to track correct and incorrect answers to the class questions. We want to make sure that scholars know that there is a level of accuracy that you're looking for, but you also want to praise thinking. We want our scholars to become more detailed, extended thinkers. Pen in hand. You want to mark up scholar work as you circulate. Go ahead and give them that written feedback, not just verbal feedback. It goes a long way. Older scholars will work towards not getting their paper marked on unless it's positive feedback. It really provides the confidence booster that scholars need. Use a coding system to affirm correct answers. As you see below, some educators choose to use symbols and then to write the meaning next to that. Some educators choose to print this chart out, laminate it, and have it in maybe the materials box in the center of group student desk settings, etc. That way, if we're working on writing, they can take out the writing rubric. If they're working on math and it's more about the accuracy and the process, then they can take out the measurement criteria for these different subjects. And then lastly, cue students to revise their answers using minimal verbal interventions. We want to talk less. So name the error, ask them to fix it, tell them you'll follow up. The goal is to empower them to catch the errors themselves, not for us to tell them that this is an error and why. No, they need to figure out why it's an error and how to navigate to get through fixing it. That empowers them. It helps them build their confidence when they can correct it on their own, etc., etc. So, stop, think, and jot. What coding system do you plan to use to provide scholars with short, clear, and concise feedback? Rubrics? Stamps? chart, a chart with symbols? What tracker will you use to track which scholars are getting your support? The goal is 75%. Have a turn and talk with your teammate to share your ideas. Now, you may want to consider having the following tools handy in your classroom to support the aggressive monitoring process. A typical checklist includes the following. Do you have a clipboard? Do you have a completed exemplar of student work? Are you providing visible feedback? Are you tallying or collecting qualitative data? Meaning, what are you learning about the scholars after coming around? You should have information that you're absolutely able to say, hey, I learned this about this scholar. Either maybe some preliminary skills, gaps in their learnings, maybe the strategic way that they're thinking. Our goal is to be able to get in their brain every time they perform a task and they give us any piece of output. It is a potential data piece that we can use to learn more about the way that they think, the way that they process information, and their level of understanding. Another question is, are you responding to the data? Okay, I have the data. Now, what am I going to do with the data? Are you prepared? Do you have strategies, tools, and methods that you can use to support what happens once you've collected the data? Do you know what the biggest misconceptions are? And did you urgently circulate to at least 75% of the scholars? You'll notice on the screen just certain materials that will support the process. If you are a virtual teacher, then digital platforms provide excellent ways of giving scholars immediate feedback. We know that we can use whatever live classroom platform we're using for instruction can provide the support that scholars need. We can use Nearpod, Edulastic, Pear Deck, Padlet, Flipgrid, GimKit, Kahoot, and a host of other platforms that can allow us to give that immediate feedback. Either us and or to partner with peer-to-peer feedback as well. This is an example of a tracker template that focuses on accuracy. However, you may want to create your own to better accommodate your coding system or diverse skills like writing, using rubrics, etc. Now, we're going to break down aggressive monitoring into 4 steps. Step 1, identify what you are monitoring for in your class lesson. It is important to be intentional, to determine which students have actually grasped the material and who need more support. It is important to consider what key concepts students need to understand in order to produce an exemplar answer. It's easy. How can we determine what an exemplar response is if our learning target and objective isn't clear? So, for example, this is a second grade Common Board that has a learning target as well to ensure that the teacher and scholars know the focus of the learning. So the do now, exit ticket, and all learning tasks are anchored in a specific skill. No confusion, no excuses. This has a clear focus, which equals focused results and focused accountability. So today, I will use strategies to make inferences about animal defense mechanisms so that I can explain in detail in a specific text, including what happened and why based on text evidence. I know I have it when I can find specific details to support animals using fleeing and or armor as a defense mechanism. So it breaks it down. We know in this situation, the do not activator We'll probably start with gathering background information to see if scholars know what a defense mechanism actually is. An exit ticket probably serves as a way. So we have our diagnostic, right? We need to know if scholars even know what a defense mechanism is. Our exit ticket seeks to conclude the assessment at the bottom. I know that I have it when I can find specific details to support animals using fleeing and or armor as a defense mechanism. So when our scholars are doing their independent structure or they're doing their independent work, this is a you do it alone example that goes along with that learning target. So this scholar is specifically looking at two animals that use the fleeing and armor as a defense mechanism. How do moths use fleeing as a defense mechanism? This scholar should be able to write an extended response and an extended response. The second part is how does a rhinoceros's thick skin work as a defense mechanism? Well, the criteria is at the bottom. So this is helping the scholar. It's a kind of a rubric checklist. It's a criteria card. So the scholar is able to say, I know that I have it when, yes, I can do the following things, that I can describe this in detail. But the criteria card at the bottom reminds them what the teacher expects. I use 2 to 3 specific vocabulary words that surround defense mechanisms. I included text evidence. I wrote in complete sentences. I stayed focused on the question. So this educator wants definitely writing structure, focuses on the question. So they stayed on task in their writing. They're focused in their writing. They included that text evidence and 2 to 3 specific vocabulary words that would be connected to this topic. Same thing with the rhinoceros as well. Step 2 in the process is to create an exemplar response. This is not something we can do the day of the lesson. This requires us to do this during our planning time. So our team planning time, or if you plan by yourself, because you're the only one that teach your grade level, and you'll have to find yourself making sure you have an example of the exemplar. So in this third grade example on character motivation, this skill, the scholars would read the book Last Stop on Market Street. So once the I do, we do, and now it's you do alone, scholars will be able to fill in this character motivation graphic. And with that, they're actually having to do the same option for 2 characters. So the teacher might have modeled this with using Nana as a character in this story, right? And so we see 2 different parts, 2 different characters in the breakdown, right? And then invited the scholars to help her finish Nana's character motivation, which modeled for them the first aspect of the process. But now, during their independent practice, now they have to go back and look at CJ's character motivation throughout the story. And so you'll notice 2 different sides, Nana's side of this character motivation and CJ's side. So this would be something they would do on their own, and the teacher would be able to use aggressive monitoring to support their ability to complete the process with accuracy. Just as it mentioned at the top, read the passage, complete the graphic organizer, including how and what the characters act, feel, does, and says. Review their notes and answer the 2 questions at the bottom of the page. So again, we're collecting that qualitative data. Step 3 in the process, determine potential student misconceptions or misunderstandings. What might this look like? We want to think about where scholars may be getting confused. Consider all the students and scholars in your classroom and individual needs for exceptional learners. We have a lot of diverse scholars in our classroom that require different approaches to their learning experience. And so this helps us to stretch. How are we going to support them? You as the educator, you're only one resource. And so we want to make sure there are multiple pathways for our scholars to get the resources they need to learn the skills that are expected for them to learn. For example, here's an example of a ninth and 10th grade scholars typically taking a geometry high school course. Well, this teacher here realized that scholars commonly have a misconception of being able to find the perimeter and the area of a triangle because most scholars struggle to accurately identify the base and the height of a triangle. So, this skill typically is learned by eighth grade. So, this teacher learned that it was powerful to have the scholars highlight the base and the height before they began actually solving the problem. And so this educator's aggressive monitoring process is to ensure that first scholars can highlight, as we see in the blue area, that they're able to make sure that they're able to identify an accurate base and the height of a triangle before they try to utilize the formula. And so this is a fast process of having scholars take out a highlighter, highlight the base, highlight the height. And once she comes around to check for accuracy, then she can release the scholars to complete the math process. Great approach. Step 4, create targeted questions in response to students' misunderstanding. So now we want to consider what you will ask students to ensure that they are developing an understanding of the lesson objective. These are the questions that you are going to ask students or scholars when you are circulating around the room. You may need to create break it down questions or bids or foundational questions to support students. We often call these essential questions, guiding questions that we would use as well. A great frame of reference for these questions include, but are not limited to, Webb's depth of knowledge. We know these questions help to increase and enhance complexity. So, using this helps us to go beyond just looking for accuracy. Accuracy just keeps us at the knowledge level of a DOK level 1 question. It's recall, it's rote memory and response. We want our scholars to live in the 2, 3, and 4 zone. We want them to be able to have extended thinking, to have those strategic thinking and applied concepts and skills. As identified here, Jeopardy is all about recall and rote response. The show Top Chef requires our scholars to give them the tools that they need for them to apply and to create something great, right? Then a DOK level 3 question is like Survivor. It's like, how do I use the knowledge to solve problems? And then a DOK 4 is like Shark Tank. Now I have all this information. I have the resources, the tools, the space to create something amazing, to create something that no one has ever thought before. An expanded and extended level of thinking. And so now let's do it. Let's picture that we have scholars who have misconceptions. These are 3 bite-sized strategies that will help us to support them in their learning. So the first, strategy number 1 is the teach back. This is when the educator says, what did Ben say about school when we were reading the book together? This is a DOK level 1. It only requires recall from the scholar. What we need to do after we ask such questions is we want to ask the student to repeat what they already know from the content or from the lesson. So this is the teach back. A lot of our scholars may fit into this demographic because of their background, socioeconomic status, and some of the hardships and stress that they're going through. Memory recall can be a challenge, but we don't want to just stay in DOK level 1. We always want to ask them a DOK level 1 to scaffold up into a DOK level 2. All right, strategy number 2, word on the street. This is when we as educators say, as I was walking around, I noticed that Caesar circled this sentence. Why do you think he did that? This takes us right into that critical thinking, the why question, right? This puts us in a DOK level 2 to a DOK level 3 question. What we want to do here is highlight the action of a successful student and then ask why they think they chose that action. So we want to make sure that we're the word on the street. We want to focus on success, okay? We want to direct their attention towards a scholar that is finding success based on what they did. This is a great reteach process. And then strategy number 3, when scholars have a misconception, is consider a skill-based question. This is when we as an educator, we say, today, we have talked a lot about character feelings. What does Ben say that tells us how he feels? This can be a mixture depending on the complexity of the text, a DOK 1 or a DOK 2 question, but it depends on the complexity of the content that scholars are utilizing. And what we want to do is we want to remind the student of the lesson's focus or a key skill in order to spark their thinking. So it's still taking us back to recall, which is that DOK level 1. But the DOK level 2 part is now we're trying to connect the character's feelings and making sure they're able to connect that. And so that does stretch into more of that applying the skills and knowledge. So let's see it, name it, and do it. Let's put it all together. Watch and observe this educator as she models the aggressive monitoring process from beginning to end. Identify what you see. Name the practice and preparation of doing this in your own classroom.
You have 2 really short passages to read. They're more like little paragraphs and a prompt at the bottom. You're going to plan on the back. So it mostly just looks like a blank piece of paper, but that's where your plan is going to go. It's a little bit of outline practice. You have 12 minutes to do this. Begin. And I'm coming around first looking for those full headings. Add it out to Jason for his urgency. Don't forget the active reading. The passages are short, but you should still do that. And I'm coming around now, checking for your author's purpose note. I'll check it off if it's correct. I'll put a dot if it's not. Don't forget that note. An author's purpose note should start with a verb. The author is trying to do what? It could be to inform, to persuade, any of those things. Just make sure it starts with a verb. You have 7 minutes remaining. You want to be getting to the outline within the next minute. And now that I'm seeing people getting to the outline, I'm coming around checking your thesis statement. Don't forget to put quotes around the titles of the articles, but then you got it. So this is asking you to compare the key information. I don't think the key information in the second one is polar bears. I think that's a detail. So what is the key idea presented in that second article? The first part of your thesis is excellent. Just fix that part. Nice, Maya. I like saying how they show the information. Nice job. You have 5 minutes to complete your outlines. I see strong theses. Now I'm looking for strong evidence. AJ's doing a really nice job of writing his evidence in shorthand. Paragraph 4, sentence 2. Doesn't take a super long time. Yanea did the same thing, just a key word from the quote.
Wow. We definitely put it all together. Hopefully you were able to see it, name it, and now you're able to take back this strategy into your classroom and do it. Go back and review all of your hashtag summaries and all of the notes that you have, and hopefully you're able to compare it to what you saw here. The teacher had a clear runway, space to be able to get to each and every scholar fast and in a quick way, had a way of really documenting the evidence on scholar work as well as a clipboard to be able to utilize that. So go through your notes and really reflect on what you saw and how, again, this teacher was able to reach and meet at least 75% of the scholars to ensure that learning is being made visible and that she's able to respond to data in real time. Now we ask you to reflect and commit. Name one thing that you will stop doing, keep doing, or do differently after having participated in this session on aggressive monitoring. Pause the video if you need more time. And mission accomplished. Our learning targets were for educators to be able to identify and understand the what, why, and how of regressive monitoring. And then learning was to be demonstrated through reflection and checks for understanding. Thank you for being amazing. And remember to be the change you expect to see in the world on a day-to-day basis.